Okay, so greetings, welcome. And can you just check the red light is on? It means
Yes,
it's recording. Yeah, okay. So welcome to the Philosophy Club. We have some guests here, come all the way from India, and our friend from France. And it's been quite a week here in the world. I'll start by just doing a little overview of what's happening this week in world affairs and locally and stuff. So, on the 22nd of July, which was on Monday, I ran the Mary Magdalene Studies Association conference here, which was very successful. We had guests come from far afield and also online, so we had talks. And this is about Mary Magdalene, who was a famous Christian saint, one of the original disciples. Some people say she was the consort of Christ, and so we had some very interesting talks about all that. We had people participating online, so thank you everyone that took part. Friends came from China and Mexico and America and Portugal, and speakers came online from all different parts as well. And and then we've had the World Peace Gardens Network, which I chair, this idea of getting peace gardens around the world. We have one here in Betet, and the monastery down the road, that's got a peace garden. And we've got the Shalimar Gardens of Lahore to agree to become a World Peace Garden, which is a Mughal garden, very world famous Shalimar Gardens in Lahore. So it's fantastic. I was talking to the director of it online on Wednesday, and that's I'm hoping we'll get the Taj Mahal, which is twinned with Lahore's Shalimar Gardens. So we have one from Pakistan, one from India, which will be a symbolic reunion of the two.
We have Shalimar Garden in Srinagar also.
You have one in Srinagar?
Yes, Shalimar Garden name itself the same.
Okay, so we can twin that as well.
Yes.
Yeah. That was built around the same time, I think, as the ones in Lahore. And that would be very symbolic, because Kashmir has obviously been a trouble spot, and if we can have a peace garden in Kashmir, in Srinagar, that would be amazing. And then 2 days ago we had the opening of the Olympic Games here in France, for which our friends have come all the way from all over the world. I mean, Paris is now the world hotspot, and I personally found the opening ceremony very moving. I watched it via a Hong Kong television channel set up here in the museum. And I liked the way they did the torch running. Lots of people took part, people in wheelchairs. It was very inclusive. I liked the boats. I liked the idea of using the river. And I liked the balloon, although I couldn't work out where the balloon was going. The commentator didn't know. I thought it was going somewhere, but actually it was tethered.
Where the air takes it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just hope it landed safely. So that was interesting, and I think they've done really well, the Olympic Games. Obviously, as the education coordinator of the Delphic Games, I feel that there's another dimension to these international sporting events, which is the arts and culture, and we should celebrate that as well. But to my friends in the Olympic movement, I give greetings and thank you and well done. Olympus is the home of Zeus, the king of the gods, and it's symbolically very important that we honour that tradition of the Olympic Games. So and yes, and our guests have come from India to spend a bit of time here. So it's been a busy week, and I think a worthwhile week. I've been working on the Love Journal. I published for my Peace Studies Institute, the only academic journal in the world on the nature of love. Because when I was working at the University of London, I taught a course on love, cooperation and altruism in the world's religions. And out of that grew this Love Journal, which we've been working on the 14th edition this last week. And we also did some practical work on the house, which was incredibly important. And thank you for helping those that did. So that's all I want to say by way of introduction. The world's at I think it's auspicious turning point. Let these games be a symbol of brotherhood and sporting camaraderie. I do think it was sad that there were terrorist attacks on the French train network. I hope to God that wasn't Putin and the Russians. I mean, they have pledged to attack France, and they have stated as much. I think that's disgraceful.
Do you think we are
if it's the
clear
case.
of this attack for the rest of the Olympic Games?
Well, I mean, only God knows this. I hope so.
Oh.
I hope so. I hope those attacks were just some sort of maverick group. But with Putin and Russia, you never know what they're going to do next. I hope sincerely that they are not going to cause trouble, because that would be a sacrilege. The whole point of the Games is that it was a time of truce, so countries couldn't participate in the old Olympic Games if they were in war. They had to declare a sacred truce 2 weeks before the Games and 2 weeks after, and runners went out to all the city-states of Greece declaring, the Olympic truce. And, if Russia had declared a truce in Ukraine, they could have participated fully. I don't know why that wasn't explored. There could have been a 4-week truce during this Olympic Games. If I'd have been Macron, I would have tried to get that, because it would have been good.
Now Ukraine, of course, has offered for peace talks.
Well,
Yes.
peace talks is one thing, but at least a truce stopped the fighting for the
when
time
they-
of the Games.
when
That
they-
would have been to honour the Olympic
Peace talk will
spirit.
start, things will start moving.
It would be good to get them going. And that was always the way of the Delphic Games as well. You couldn't participate in the Delphic Games, which were the arts and culture.
What is your opinion that we should have blocked all those fighting nations from joining these Olympics?
Well, that's they've done it with Russia. I would personally say that Israel has
Yes.
broken the Olympic spirit. in
Israel,
its war on
Iraq,
Gaza.
Iran, why not all such groups who are already fighting for one region or the other?
I think
those are involved.
there's an argument for. I think Israel certainly has broken the Olympic spirit, and people are saying this. Commentators online.
But all this, there are 6 nations fighting with Israel. So all the 6, why they should not be blocked? 7, Israel is 1, plus 6. Ukraine and Russia. All
Well,
should
there's a distinction. I mean, they always made a distinction between the nation that was aggressed on and the one that was fighting back.
when we
That's
talk
an
about
important
peace,
distinction.
there is no distinction. Well, for the sake of peace, there is no distinction.
No, but in the Delphic codes, in the Olympic codes, there is a distinction.
I'm just asking whether we should have done it or not.
Yes, well, India could have put that forward. I don't know that you have. I don't think you have. And I would like to see India playing a much better role in peace. And I mean, I know Modi has tried to keep
Can you tell
ties
me?
with both sides.
Can you tell me why India is better for this role? Why you think so? What are your reasons?
Sure.
We are putting this burden on India's shoulders,
Okay.
but there must be your reasons behind it.
Sure. Okay, well, I'll come back to that during the course of the philosophy
You
club.
should go along with the question.
No, I'm going to come back to that later once we've started the actual thing. But it's an important question. Can you hold it in your mind? I'll come
So
back to it.
automatically,
Yeah.
it depends
It's-
on you,
Sure.
when you want to answer.
Yeah, no, I'm going to answer it during the course of this.
Okay.
Okay, so what we do the first,
So we don't expect anybody else today?
not today, no. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose one of the periodic table numbers. So look at the chart, right? And choose one that you want to learn more about, or that you have an issue with, or you think needs explaining, right? So 1 to 168, it could be any of those. Which one do you think is a key one that needs to be explained? And if you can't decide, then you can shut your eyes and just put your finger on the page. Some people prefer that.
I have a choice.
Okay, you've chosen.
Yes.
Okay, what's your one?
So Shintoism.
Okay. Which number?
So 91V it is.
91. Okay, fine.
91V.
Yes, religious Shintoism.
Yes.
Cool. Excellent. Armel, what's your one?
Of course, some Hinduism, but I don't know which one to choose. Between Vedic, the origin, I guess, and modern, which is the other extremity, or whatever you like it.
Well, it's your choice. You go for it.
79B.
Maybe as a beginner, Vedic.
You'll go for 61.
Yeah, yes.
Sure, okay.
61B.
So we have those two, right. And which one are you going to have, Gulab?
I go to 124K. Esoteric Alchemy.
Okay. Right. Well, those are all very interesting, and thank you for sharing. I think I'll go, I'm going to do the Shinto one, which is from Japan, and the word Shinto is interesting because it comes from Shen Tao, and it means literally the way of the Tao, or the way of the gods. Shen is the gods, and Tao is the way. So it's a teaching about honouring the gods, which in Japanese are called kami. And they, I think all cultures, all tribal peoples, initially indigenous peoples, believed in the kami. They used different names. They saw them as spiritual principles that underlie material existence. So the kami of water, the kami of fire, and so on. In the Shinto tradition, these become the kami of places and persons and even families. So if you come from a powerful family, your family has powerful kami. And they have shrines. The Shinto people love nature. I think it's a natural religion, a nature-based religion. And so they worship the kami of beauty in nature. A mountain, a lake, a river. All these are full of kami, which are invisible to the normal eye, but you can be trained to see them if you're sensitive. And they're different gods who create the world. And of course, because they're Japanese, they feel Japan was the first created. And so their kami are the most powerful of all the kami. And the Japanese people were the first people. But I've studied religions enough to know that every people claims that. And that's one of the difficulties. Every American Indian tribe believes it's the first people. The Navajo, they were the people who've come from the origin place to their sacred sites. And what we have to realize is that there's a kind of a universalism about this belief. It's quite sweet, really, that we all feel we're the most important, we're all the holiest people. But the Shinto people didn't only think that. Shintoism became a very sophisticated religion. It wrote down its text. The Kojiki is their great, like the Bible. It tells the story of the origin of the universe and humanity. And it was written down in about the 600s, 700s. And learned Shinto intellectuals study that. And then they compared it to Chinese thought. So if you're a Japanese sage, you have to learn Shinto teachings, but also Chinese thought, Taoism, because they see them as part of the same continuum. And also you would need to learn Confucianism, which teaches about right behaviour, ethics, and so on. And more recently, of course, they've learned about Western philosophy, and so Japanese intellectuals know everything about everything. And yet they stay faithful to Shintoism. The kami intervene in life in synchronicities. They are present in their influence on us. What we could call good karma is the kami helping us. And they also, because they adopted Buddhism, the Shintoist intellectuals of Japan also adopted Buddha's teachings about Dharma and reincarnation and karma, and it added it on to Shintoism. And so I've been told by intellectual Japanese friends of mine that the average Japanese is poly-religious. And so they believe in Shintoism for the life force, the energy of love. in their spring, in their youth. They get married in a Shinto temple. They have raised their family in Shinto beliefs. But towards the end of their lives, they become more serious and sober, and they're thinking about their future lives, and they gravitate more towards Buddhism. And their funeral service will be in a Buddhist temple, where they will say prayers for a beneficent future life. So the Buddhist and the Shinto traditions, they collaborate together in the sort of stages of life.
No, but I've seen in average some Japanese families, they have Shinto prayer temple, small temple-like thing, symbol
In the
of
home,
the Shintos. But also they will have another temple, which is called the Hindu temple. I was telling the Shinto from Hindu to China to Japan. It has shifted. Japan had maximum interaction with other philosophies, with Chinese, even with Americans. For how many years American soldiers were lying in the Japan? The new generation.
Well, American soldiers aren't known for
I
their
know.
philosophical
That is exactly what I am
intelligence.
saying. So Bible and all those, everything is amalgamated in Japan today. So Japan is not purely either Shinto or Hindu or Christian or whatever. It's a mixture of everything.
Sure. But I'm addressing in this particular question the
No,
Shinto.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you see the children, they are more like Americans. They are fully in school dresses, all everything tuck. You don't say they are from Japan. You see,
Yeah.
this is a big difference.
It is ironic. I had a Japanese friend come here, a student, who stayed 2 weeks with me, and she was educated in Japan, and then the family moved to Switzerland. She's at university in Bern. She said she learned more about Shintoism in 2 weeks here than
Yes.
she had in her entire
Exactly, you are
educational
right.
life. Because it's actually been banished from the syllabus. The Americans secularized the Japanese education
Yes,
system,
yes.
so you weren't allowed to talk about all
School
this.
children coming back from school to home in the train. All earphone, dancing on English music. Every time first thing I notice is this.
When you were in Japan,
Ah.
you watched this. Yeah.
I think
Did you go to any Shinto temples?
Not in the last 10 years, but I had 4 visits in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, simultaneously. But this is the big change I saw. And I did see most of the Japanese women, no kimono. This is another thing I see.
Maybe they keep it in the home.
No kimono.
Yeah.
This is a big change and influence of American culture.
Sure. Okay, so I'll just finish off this Shinto one. So there are two categories. Religious studies scholars differentiate between philosophical Shintoism, which goes into cosmology and ideas and all that, and religious Shintoism, which is more to do with rituals and practices. And they're both important in Japan. There are Shinto temples where people like to go, and they do purification rituals. Each temple has a sacred gate called the Torii, marking the entrance to the sanctuary. And the other thing about these Shinto temple places is that they are usually preserved nature. So in the middle of bustling Tokyo or other cities, they would have preserved this landscape as a sacred site from immemorial times. It's never been built on. And that's preserving the wildness at the heart of nature, which we come from. So there's something beautiful about that, I think. And yeah, there are initiation rituals that people go through. And obviously not every Japanese person is following these, but some can, and it's there if you want. And there are still thousands of temples, available. Okay, so we'll now do the next one.
So I have a
Yeah.
quick question.
Question,
So this is
yeah.
not particularly about Shintoism,
Okay.
but since this is a periodic table, right,
Sure.
of religions,
Yeah.
how do you distinguish, what's a bright line between a primal religion and a non-primal religion? How do you classify that, right?
Well, it's not my personal classification. I mean, the table is the embodiment of the collective wisdom of 200 years of religious studies. It's a new discipline that's developed, really, since the end of the 19th century. Before that, religions sort of promoted their own theology. There were theological schools, but nobody was doing comparative religion much. The consensus is that this category called primal religions is important and worth studying, and so I think in the 1930s, alongside the work of anthropologists who went out and studied so-called primitive beliefs, often from France or Britain, and interviewing and spending time with tribal people and learning how incredibly complex their worldviews are, really sophisticated, you know, and the gods are always present and what they're up to and how you appease them, and it's a whole thing which anthropologists wrote huge tomes on.
No, so, sorry, maybe I didn't frame the question correctly. So I understand the anthropological standpoint on primal lifestyles or
Yes.
primal traditions, and
Right.
but what makes religion non-primal? Maybe that's the question I'm asking.
Okay, so the fundamental distinction, according to the scholarship,
Yeah.
is when they have a sacred text,
Okay.
they're with the advent of writing
Okay.
and the
That makes
codification of the wisdom tradition, then it becomes a revealed religion,
Okay.
which is what we call Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism to some extent. Hinduism is both. It's interesting, it straddles, because there are people living in the primal tradition
Right.
in India who would call themselves Hindu. But then there are very sophisticated scholars who are like studying the Vedas as
Sure.
a revealed religion. That's the main distinction. Yeah? Okay,
Really helpful. Thank you.
yeah, let's look at the Vedic one now, because that, I mean, we do have an expert here on the Vedas, so it's like, I'm only going to say a bit and then I'll hand on to Gulab, so I'll say a bit,
Go as per
then
your,
you do your bit.
as per your
Yeah.
classification.
Sure. So, I mean, Veda means knowledge, and it is, it's the revealed knowledge. These scriptures of the Vedas are incredibly profound, and the Rig Veda is one of the oldest scriptures known to humanity, worth reading, and it's a set of hymns used for sacred rituals still to this day. The sound is important of the Vedas, this ancient language Sanskrit, which was from the same sort of time as the Gathas of Zoroaster were being revealed. So Zoroastrianism and the Vedic religion are kind of from the same era. It is thought 1750 BC at least, but before that there was a long, even earlier period, because we can see in the Indo-European culture, like in the far west of Europe, we have the Druid tradition, which is very similar. We have similar mantras and similar ideology and so on. So scholars of comparative religion are really studying away the Vedas. They were translated into English, and I've got copies here, which I've been studying for a long time. And but in the core, they're an oral tradition. And I have an oral DVD, 3 DVDs of the entire Vedas being chanted by three Hindu monks, sages, in Sanskrit. It's very moving to listen to, the sound, the rhythms. You know, it recounts, I mean, in the Indian civilization reached a very, very high point quite early on of philosophical sophistication. The Vedas are posing philosophical questions, like they were having a philosophy club in ancient Vedic times, you know, daily, because although these rishis were receiving divine inspiration, they were also questioning it. There was critical reason going on. So they're asking questions, you know, who am I? Where do I come from? What is space? What is sound? And then the Vedas often take the form, the Rig Veda asks these questions, but it gives a story, a narrative. The gods are important. So in that early Vedic period, Indra is the most important deity, in fact. And I'm a great fan of Indra because I think because I like the early Vedic times. It was only later, really, that the Trimurti, Shiva and Vishnu and Brahma became more important than Indra. I think that Indra's role is also important. You couldn't study the Vedas unless you took a vow of non-violence and ahimsa. To receive sacred knowledge, you have to be worthy of it. And that's part of the Vedic tradition. So if you're going to study whether a rishi is seer, still to this day, you have to take a certain vow of sexual correct practice of you know, non-violence of thought, word and deed and so And that's why one of the great teachers, Vedic teachers, Kapila, who developed a yoga system as well, inspired Buddha with his teachings in what is called Kapilavastu, where Buddha was born and raised, is named after Kapila, founder of Samkhya Yoga, who is regarded as a great rishi. So I think it's fascinating. There are so many mysteries here about. But what I like, as a comparative religion expert, when I look at the Vedas, I see parallels to the Gauls, to the Druids of Ireland. I don't see they're unique, and I don't see them as being the only ones. I see them as part of a family of rishis and sages that were everywhere on the planet. In the Semitic peoples as well, the prophetic tradition of Judeo-Christian Islamic thought, to me, is from the same root as the Vedas. And one of the tragedies of our time is that scholars haven't made that plain. Al-Biruni, a great Islamic scientist, when he studied Indian philosophy in the 1200s, he knew this. And he was trying to understand what is their equivalent to the prophetic transmission lineage that the Arabs had knowledge of. And so the problem is that each culture only knew of its own prophets. What we now have to do is learn about everybody's prophets and then study psychologically what is it that makes for prophethood. What is that prophetic intelligence that is universal and that makes somebody an Isaiah or a rishi or a druid, And I think the Vedas are very important because they're some of the earliest scriptures. They tell us about our ancestors, actually, what they thought. And there would have been Vedas here in Gaul. The Druids would have chanted and done their mantras, but they were lost because Caesar conquered them all and killed a lot of them. And so we've lost those. And they only survived a bit in manuscripts in medieval Ireland and in stories. But people have tried to vision what they were, because the teachings are virtually the same. Dharma. The word Dharma, which is central to the Vedic tradition, is there in the word Druid. It means a truth seer. And the word Vid, Druvid, the knower of truth, is the same as Veda, meaning the knowledge. And it comes from the same root as to see, videre in Latin, or vision or video. So it's profoundly interesting. And but anyway, over to you, Gulab. What are the Vedas in your understanding, and why are they important? Why should young people study them still?
Veda, basically it tells you your inner side and your outer side. That means your spiritual part and your physical part. And it teaches you that both are working on the same principle. Both have the same contents. So if you talk about the universe, if you talk about the individual, you talk about the bird or a plant or an ant or elephant, they all have the same content in different proportions and ratios. And same principle, they are working on it. This is pure scientific documents. If you did, I haven't seen any other document talking that precisely about the scientific relationship between the species and the rest of the thing, even the sun or moon or mountains. They also are part of species. Stones also grow. Teachers also, trees also speak, or we may not understand, but they have their life. So the Veda, of course, it needs little more effort to understand, because there was no language. And we were talking, when the Veda were evolved, there was no language. So they were in the symbols. So now you have to interpret symbols. So you have your own interpretation. You will have yours, everybody will have his own interpretations. So because of these interpretations and translations in various languages, today we don't know what Veda means, where we are going, finally it has changed many all shapes and sizes across the world. But in, you can say, in the principle, Veda talks about how life comes and takes the form, how it is dissolved back from in the source, and how the cycle and recycle, the process continues with the two basic elements which science agrees, that is matter and energy. Veda also has the same two elements, but names are different because of the language. Science says matter and energy, we say Brahma and Maya, the two elements, or we say Agni and Soma. So, I mean, beside languages, there is no difference. It's all pure scientific literature. Rishis had no equipment or laboratory in those days. So they experimented everything in their own body. They internalized things and tried to learn more about the body and the universe, how they could try to connect those principles. Today, what is the difference? Today we go to scientific laboratory and we feed the data on the machine, go and sleep. Man is not connected with the information. So in the morning you will see the results. So this result is the science, taken to be the results of the science. Now, who is going to use? The result, actually impact depends on the user. Like atomic energy can be used for power and for atomic bomb. So it depends who is using this information. In that Vedic information is because it is already experimented on the human beings, it cannot go against the well-being of the human society. It has to be for the good of the society. This is the basic difference between Vedic science and modern science. So today you have seen medical sciences. Why it is changing after every 20 years? When we were in the school, the self-advising, drugs were on top for medicine for all
Become a business.
problems.
Yeah.
Then it was banned.
Yeah.
Penicillin came. Sulfurs were banned. After 15 years, penicillin banned. It's an antibiotic banned. Why? Why science cannot change like this? This is why. But because it depends on the user. Science is not wrong, but the user's mind is wrong. He wants to have atomic bomb. He doesn't want atomic energy. So,
Sure.
I mean, this is how I look at it.
Sure. Okay.
In Vedic terms, it will be Vedic atomic energy.
So Gulab has his own unique interpretation of the Vedas,
Yeah.
it would be fair to say.
So this will be a basic
He
difference
studied it
in
for
Vedas.
30 years.
Vedas will always be
And,
positive to the society.
He finds within the Vedas all kinds of scientific teachings
Yes.
which...
But all positive. For the sake of the society. No Vedic information has ever gone against the human society. But whereas science has created many blunders, which we know.
So that's part of a bigger conversation. We won't have that one now because the scientific boxes are at the bottom of the table. We haven't.
No, we are talking
selected
about the
one.
Veda. Veda
Yeah,
is science. No, it is not, we are not talking about science.
Sure.
We are talking about Vedas.
Yes.
Is it
Okay.
not-
Well, thank you very much for your addition, Gulab. I appreciate that. I want to come to the third one, and in a sense, you hinted at that. We're also going to talk about esotericism in the form of alchemy, which is box number 124.